Okay, so the definition of Google gave me is when you subsist outside of the confines of traditional utility structures like water, electricity, and the sewer systems, and even gas, like natural gas, city provides. So some ways to live off grid. We're going to be talking about water, food, energy needs, and the like. So with your water, the average person uses 60 gallons per day, and that's not just your drinking water, that's your showering, you're washing your dishes, things like that. We can have a well dug, like if you have a property outside of the city or something like that, you can have a well dug, but it's going to take, it could take tens of thousands of dollars depending on where you live. We have a water table in Texas, it's pretty high, but that water is not always potable. It could be full of parasites and things that make you sick. So you have to really dig deep to get the good water. We can have water delivery, right? You can pay somebody to bring you thousands of gallons, but you need to have a reservoir dug and or some type of system, yeah, and have a pump also that works. And how are you going to power that pump, right? You have catchment systems like this. These are people who just decided they were just going to try it out and collect rain. Now, this depends on, do you get rain, right? So that's what you have. Yeah, when you run out of water, if there's a drought, you know, that's it. These are pretty incredible because now these can also collect humidity, and and people in Africa have used things like this as well. Those other ones, that's called a rain saucer, and it's just another collection device. These are pretty much standalone. These are, you can find these sometimes on like Craigslist or OfferUp, right? For like $100 sometimes. Sometimes they're $300 depending, how much is in circulation. People like this who sell these type of things usually sell them used, so you can try to haggle for a better price. Your food. The average woman of a homesteader, not a city folk who's sitting behind a desk and typing, needs 2,000 calories. Men about 25, really 25 to 3,000, depending on how much hard work that you are doing on your homestead. You're going to need your own garden, enough to, it's pretty hard to just, I don't mean to offend anybody, but for those who are vegan, it's pretty hard to be a homesteader. From what I've heard from people who have done it and tried to be vegan, it is extremely hard for them to produce enough food from their own garden to give their caloric needs. So I'm just, right, it's hard either way. But when you're only society, how you say? Yes, with only vegetables, to get your calories, 2,000 calories. How much is in a one thing of lettuce? Not even 5 calories, right? So keep that in mind if you want to be a homesteader vegan. So we have animals. We have chickens. We have cows. We have goat, sheep, rabbits. Now a lot of those animals are dual purpose. Chickens, they give you eggs, and you can cull your chickens for the meat. You can use your chicken feathers for brooms, pillows, hats. So if you want to, make a little off, how you say, offside or side job, things like that. You can use those resources. Same with the sheep and goat. They give your meat and milk, as well as you can use their hair. Cows, of course, they give you milk. And with all this milk, you get your cream, your butter, your cheese. So they're multi-purpose. And bees. Don't forget about bees. Even if you don't want to use the bees for honey, you still need them to pollinate your garden. Now I'd like to hand it over to Ms. Charlotte to talk about food preservation.
Okay, off-grid living, we've talked about not being tied to the city, county, co-op utilities. So if you're using solar power for your energy, if you're using propane for your cook stove, just however you're doing that. Having food, saving your food, preserving your food when you're off grid. There's different ways to do that. A little outline on the front. You can can your food. Um, a gas stove, I think, may work better, but you need the proper canner, 16 quarts or larger, if you're going to can your food that you grow. You can water bath your fruits. Some tomato products can be water bath. Not all tomatoes are high enough in acid to be able to water bath. Talk about water bath? I don't know what that is. Oh, okay. Yes, where the jars are placed in a large pot, covered by at least 1 inch, preferably 2 inches of water. You boil it for anywhere from 10 to 25 minutes or so, and it sterilizes the food and it's safe to put on your shelf. These are high acid foods, a lot of your berries, things like that. Some tomato products can be water bath, but as I was saying, not all tomatoes you grow now are real high in acid, so you might need to add some lemon or something to your recipe to be sure it's enough so that you can water bath it, or you pressure can it. And that is a special canner that the top seals down tight. It's got a gauge on it or the little weight that jiggles. You have, for the low acid foods, you have to get the temperature higher than boiling. 212 is not enough to kill the botulism spores. It has to get up to 240, and you can only do that applying pressure to the heat, and that will get it up high enough, and it'll kill the botulism, so you can preserve the chickens or whatever it is you're canning to have for later on. And there is a part of the handout talks about canning, safe canning. We don't have a problem with the altitudes because we're not over 1,000 feet. I think we're 800 and something, so we're safe there. What if we were in Hilltop? You want to check, you can go, if you're off grid, hopefully you still are able to get some internet. You can go and check your altitude, and if you are over 1,000 feet, then you need to go up higher in pressure on your pressure canner. Normally it's 11 pounds if you're using the gauge. A 10-pound rocker on the canner will work. That's the same basically. If you're over 1,000 feet, you need to go up to 15 pounds of pressure on your gauge, and you put the 15-pound weight on the jiggler. Because the higher you are, the oxygen is different, and you need to have it higher. Okay, tell me about this. That's 3 dozen freeze-dried organic eggs. 3 dozen, wow. Oh my gosh. But yes, the Instapot has not been tested by a third-party independent research lab to be proven safe to can foods in, other than you could use it as a water bath canner maybe. But for low acid foods, all of your meats and a lot of your vegetables, it won't work. Your food won't be safe. Yes, sir. Oh, it's a big rage thing. You can cook food, and it does pressure, but because it's electric, the heat element sometimes turns on and off, and so it doesn't keep that temperature to create the pressure you need. Presto, who makes great pressure canners, have come out with an electric one. It also has not been tested by the third-party independent research lab. They've researched it, and they say it's good, but they haven't released their notes from their research, and so until they put it out where people can see if it's really real, I would suggest not doing it, but, you know. Yeah, yeah. And again, being electric, the heating elements tend to go on and off to keep it from overheating, and that's not good. Okay, your next way of preserving your foods to have for later on would be drying or dehydrating. And there's a lot of dehydrators out there. I think Excalibur is supposedly top of the line. I've got a little Oster that I've used to do apple chips and things like that. Um, it takes quite a while, and of course, both of these things need electricity. So if you're running on solar panels and they're going into your battery bank, it's going to use up a lot. One of the pages in your handout shows how you can make your own dehydrators, which I think are pretty cool. It's funny, I had these things numbered, and then I thought, oh wait, it's not going to print right, so I took the numbers off, and I'm sorry I did now. But you can make your own solar dryer, yes. I worked at Home Depot for a while as a cashier, and this man came through, and the other ladies knew him. He bought 6 air conditioner filters, and he used it to make his jerky. He would put one filter down, lay out the jerky, put the next filter, and keep doing that, and then put the last filter on top as a cover. He would tape them all together. He'd put a 20-inch box fan underneath it to blow air through, and it would dry the jerky until it was dry enough, for him to put away. God, I can't think of the words. But anyway, to put it away in jars or however you want to do it. That's one way. It's pretty humid here in San Antonio. I don't know if the hill country is a little bit less humid or not. If you go south of here, it gets more humid. So you would need a day like today where the humidity's down to almost nothing. You might be able to do something like that. But I kind of like the one where it shows like a ramp. That I've seen other pictures of this. The bottom part of this is painted black, and it's got sides all around, and on top is a piece of plexi or regular glass. The sun comes through, hits that black paint, and the heat comes up and goes through and dries your food for you. I think that's pretty neat. I'd love to make one something like that. Yes, sir. Yeah, well, and they say on the dash of the car, would work even. Um, have y'all done much dehydrating? Y'all do? Okay. Oh, okay, okay. Oh, have you? Oh, oh, wow. Okay, okay, okay. That's neat. And you can use your oven. There's information about using your oven to dehydrate foods. If you have to be able to get the temperature low enough, you don't want it so high that it's going to end up cooking it or burning it or whatever. But you could use your oven, set it up like that. Also, you can save your food fermenting it, as in sauerkraut, which I've never done. I've never eaten sauerkraut. And you can pickle foods using a brine, a salt brine. There are kind of strict rules about the salt level and the vinegar level. So you want to, if you're using a recipe, follow it to the letter so that your foods don't end up spoiling. Has anybody? I've never done sauerkraut. Oh, okay, okay. Mm. If Okay, okay. Okay. And of course, freeze drying. Earl knows that. The printout that I got for freeze drying gives you an experiment if you want to try this. Uh, my little freezer in my refrigerator was too packed for me to try it, but I think I'd like to, is to do your real thin slices of apples or potatoes and put them in there and they freeze. You don't cover them. And basically the way air conditioning works, of course, is it sucks the moisture out of the air and that's how it cools. And so in the freezer, it's sucking the moisture out of the air and the potato slices, apple slices, and they're slowly drying and they're frozen. So it's basically like freeze drying. It takes, according to this, it takes about a week or so. You can pull one out and I think it says to, if you add water to it, if it turns black, then it's not dry enough. But you know, you could actually kind of do that yourself if you had freezer space and wanted to try that. The next way to save your food is root cellars. I don't know that I don't know anyone, I guess the hill country you could.
Well, I'm from up north, Canada, and we have very common almost, right?
Oh. Yeah, I guess if you had a storm shelter or if you have a basement, not many homes here in San Antonio have them because the water level's a little high. But if you have a basement, you could set up a corner of your basement for your root cellar. Make sure it's not heated. It would need to vent so air can come through. One opening would be low, the other would be high. The cool air would come in and take out the warmer air. But you can, yes, ma'am. Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah, no, go ahead. Yes. Oh, okay. Okay. Right. Okay. And that's a good temperature for preserving your foods, yeah.
So even if we did have, still not going to be, you could air condition it, but
How deep would you have to go, I guess, is the question.
yeah, exactly. Once you go too deep, it actually starts warming back up. I don't know. To answer your question, 20 feet maybe probably.
Okay. Uh-huh. Oh, okay. And I suppose if you could put it where there's trees around so it's shaded more, that would help. Yeah, yeah, definitely burming. Um, okay, and the last thing about food for not well, I guess off-grid living is eating seasonally. Uh, you know, eat what you're growing in your garden right now. That way, you know, I mean, you won't be able to have bananas in January unless you've taken some during the summer and sliced them up and freeze dried or something or dehydrated. But eat what's fresh in your garden now because, it's fresh. It's got the most nutrients. And you can grow, there's a chart, I think on the back, the last page is a chart showing, what you can be growing during each season. And, eat like that. You'll eat more of the greens, the winter greens that you can grow during the winter. During the summer, you're going to have a lot more options. And again, you get all those tomatoes, can them up, and that way you can have tomatoes, in the wintertime. But eat seasonally. What's growing in your garden now is what you should be eating now. It's healthier for you. You're not, going to the store to buy food that's been trucked in somewhere. It's better for the environment, and it's cheaper for you because it's right there in your garden. If y'all have questions or comments, I'm good. I'll see if I can answer. Anything? Yes. Oh, okay. And on the very front page, I've got the resources: the National Center for Home Food Preservation, Texas A&M AgriLife for vegetables and all. And the third one here is garden size, because we were talking about being able to grow enough food, to support yourself. And you can, figure out if you're a family of 4, how many rows of corn, how many rows of beans or tomatoes you need to grow to support your family. The last resource on there, this is a blog that I read. This lady took a small chest freezer and converted it to a refrigerator. And in this one post here, she talks about how she did it and how it works for her. And I think they're running this off of their solar panel. They're still on the grid, but they're moving towards solar for their whole property. And I believe this runs off their solar. If you want to read it, but anyway, there's other resources here. But different ways to have food, when you're off grid and limited on your utility use. Yes, yes. And also, you don't want to go too far. You don't want a real old one because, we used to put wax on top of our foods when we preserved them, and we know better now. And some of the older ball books have recipes where they've tested and realized, okay, that's really not the best way to do it. So be sure if you can, get the latest one, because it'll be the more up to date, the most up to date, and with the more proven recipes in it. But yes, ball is good. Okay? You're welcome.
Yes, sir. Your energy needs will depend on what power needs that you have, right? So what do you want to power? Your refrigerator? That's usually a must. You have a deep freezer that you must have. You must have AC. I mean, do you have a health condition that you have a CPAP that you need to run? Those are insulin that you need to keep cold. Those are real life things, and those are not luxuries. Those are life and death type of things. But otherwise, you have luxuries that you're not willing, like your blow dryer, your mixer, for making your food. A lot of people don't want to spend an extra 20 minutes having to stir by hand, and it just gets your shoulder sore. All right. So we have a few different options when it comes to energy needs. John is going to talk to us about solar. I thought I put his name up here. I apologize about that. So, John, do you want to talk first about solar? Okay. Because that's usually what people are most interested in.
Let's see if we can figure out how to switch this over. The top right. Oh, the menu up here. Hey, I figured it out. I'm pretty. Well, there was a little bit of help. I don't know. Well, hey, so I see a lot of new faces. We did a pretty long presentation in August for backup power. I did a little bit about solar and just kind of the intro levels. So there's 3 types of solar that you can use for different applications. Specifically, we're looking at off-grid, so that means not tied to the actual power grid. So GVEC or ERCOT or whoever doesn't have any real say-so to this. So there's 3 different levels. There's the grid tied, which is what you most commonly see with people with panels on their houses. So it basically backfeeds into the grid itself, and that's how you get a lower power bill. Problem is that if power goes out, your solar panels aren't doing anything. They're generating power, but it's not going anywhere. Then the next level is the grid tied system plus the backup power, which is when you probably have heard about the Tesla power walls. Pretty expensive, but it's a really nice backup system so that you can use that power as a backup when the grid goes down. And then specifically, we're talking about off-grid solar, and that's where we kind of have the same system, but we don't have ERCOT tapping into it. So, of course, there's some benefits and cons to each of those. Let's see. So, solar, the cool thing about it is you can purchase all of the components yourself, put it together. Not that difficult. I've done it a couple times. My buddy has a homestead where he wanted a little extra power, and we put it together for about around $4,000. Sounds expensive, but he was able to power his house off of that. The biggest thing is the energy requirements. So if you guys want to take a picture of that, or you can find this online. It's not difficult to find. Basically, you go through and you look at all the things that you would like to use, and you add it together, anything that you're using all at once. Something important to note is there's the running watts, and then there's the surge watts. The surge is when a compressor for like a refrigerator or an AC unit kicks on. It uses a large amount of wattage. So you have to build the system around those needs. Panel mounting locations. So you see a lot of people put them on the house, south facing normally, which is great, unless you don't want people to know that you have solar panels. I'm sure a lot of people are concerned about that. So you can actually do a ground mount, which what I've seen do on my buddy's homestead. So he has a lot of tree cover around his house, and he actually cut down a bunch of trees out on a field, and he mounted some ground mounts for solar panels. He was able to stack those up, and he bought used commercial ones. So they're good for, typically panels are good for 25 years. And these, for some reason, they were only 5 years old, and he got them for about half price. And so he's got half price panels for 20 years, give or take.
Just on that note, Jeff Free has experience at that. You probably
Yeah.
used commercial. Can you share that? It varies everything. There's 65.
Yeah, that's so.
Now the only difference now is bundles. Now they're putting
So,
but if you do,
right.
split it 4 ways or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean they're all over the place. I stopped at the Latter-day Saints storehouse probably 4 or 5 months ago, and there was a a guy. I was just picking up some wheat berries, and there was a guy loading solar or fixing solar panels in the back of his truck, and he was actually from Harlingen down south, and he came up to San Marcos to pick some up. He said the deal was just it was out of sight, so something to really look out for. And then of course the components of an off-grid system. So we talked about the solar panels. Next would be the charge controller, which controls how the batteries get charged in the system. From the charge controller, it goes to the batteries, and we'll talk about those. There's different types of batteries. You can go super expensive. The lithium ion phosphate, they're the top of the line. They're really expensive, but you can actually decharge or you can drain them a lot lower than conventional lead acid batteries. And more times. The problem is that they are super expensive. So you can still find deals online. There's a guy that sells retired cell phone tower backup batteries. They're huge. They're 130 pounds, and they're 190 amp hours, and that's they're coming out about $150. Now they are used. Those are lead acid. So the shelf life on that is about 8 to 10 years. And they've been used about 2 years, so I figure I could probably get 6 years of decent use out of that. Of course, from the from the batteries, we're actually going to the inverter. We're going to be switching that power from direct current to alternating current so that you can use it inside of your house. If you're using this more often, they have what's called a soft start device or a soft start inverter, which basically, if you're running a motor with a compressor, that initial surge can take a wear on those motors. So it actually starts it and ramps up the energy slowly to help protect the motors.
There's also, like, what is it called when it starts?
The surge. Yeah, that's the surge wattage we talked about in this chart. So, not all of them have surge. For example, the coffee maker, it just has 1,000 running watts, but no surge. When you look at a deep freezer, the running watts are 500, but the surge is 1,500. So you have that initial push of energy needed to start that compressor. What questions do you guys have? EMP. So that would be somewhat difficult, I imagine. No? Where would you put that?
It goes before the controller.
Before the charge controller. So it would go in between the panels and the charge controller. Okay, would that protect the solar panels?
The solar panels aren't going to be an issue with EMP.
Okay.
The charge controller would be, the inverter would be anything down.
Because it's a giant ground wire that also shuts everything off.
Yeah, when the EMP hits the device through the cables that are coming in, it shunts it off into the ground.
Okay.
And so this company, EMP Shield, they have them for entire solar system panels. I have one.
Okay.
They have them for entire houses, so they also have them for vehicles.
Yeah, I knew that they advertised for houses and vehicles. I didn't know that they had them for the systems. Really? That might be something to look into.
That cost for EMP Shield, the cost is about $380 per device.
Right. Okay.
And when we had the bug out with mine,
Mm-hmm.
hook it up on positive, negative, with the ground. In theory, it protects, but in reality, if it doesn't work, it's not like you're going to be able to follow it.
Yeah.
But they've gone through a lot of testing. A lot of government agencies, police departments, something that looks do the reviews on both, right? Does it work? Who knows? Well, they've gone through, scientific test do it's certified, the government has gone through it, there's a lot of tests. But I like to be able to drive my vehicle. I would like to drive.
Cool. So, anyone else? Yeah, 50-year-old truck would work as well.
Yeah, I'm looking for one of those. If they say 70s, free point carburetors. I've gotten the overboard.
Mm-hmm.
Probably about 3 months before the whole COVID thing. That's when I really started. So I started doing a bunch of different stuff. And I got these solar systems. There's a 2,000 watt hour and 14 watt. And I got 100. But my idea of situation is that to make it.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got on and started, go down your rabbit hole on YouTube and that, I got so flipping confused.
Oh, sure.
I just kind of gave up. So as soon as you sit out, I've seen all this 100 times. I just couldn't figure out how to put it all together without killing them. Like I said, I know enough these days, and that's kind of where I was. So I just got so jumbled in my head. I gave up.
So my recommendations, because I was there, I did end up building a system for my house for backup purposes. Start small. Start with 100 watts, 200 watt panels, and just buy a cheap charge controller. And you can buy Harbor Freight sells 35 amp hour batteries. Just they're small, they're tiny, they're right.
Because I think the blue egg that feed into it.
Right.
So I mean that's why I went that way because I had everything picked out. I had my charge controller, the batteries, all that. I had all the components picked out, but I just couldn't in my head. I couldn't. And there's so many people that send you, parallel series, all these things. But that's idea. You really, like you were telling me in that previous chart, you really need to determine two things. What you're really willing to go without, because electricity takes a lot of electricity, and how much you want to spend. So everything costs much battery. Well, for what I pay for the generator. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe afterwards you can ask them if they could come to your house and because that's what we're here for, the network. Yeah, exactly. So ask them and see if maybe somebody can come to your home and help you because he has all the equipment. What I understand, he has just one create and put it together, right? And so you can start selling.
Most of that, those phosphate batteries are doing business.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to ask.
That's all I have. So
John's
wouldn't go that far.
One thing, biogas, now I'm not getting paid to promote them. I just think they're very interesting. They have a pretty good setup. They have even a toilet setup, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But you put all your waste in there, and it's through anaerobic digestion that you make your own fuel, like your own diesel, it can power your generator. So if you're living off grid, you don't want to waste anything, right? Not even your poop and pee. You don't want to waste it. And you can power your stuff with your own bodily waste. Pretty cool, right? Now, heating and cooling. This is Texas, right? So you're working in the field all day, your homestead, you want to come home to a kind of a cooler place, right, to be able to relax. Not very many people can rest if they don't have like a little cooler place. But I want to talk about heating just real quick, because when it's cold here, it is really cold, right? So this is called an earthship home. This is just a different build, a way of building if you're going to be off grid and you haven't even started yet, you just have a piece of land. What they do is they berm, and they use tires, they use all types of things that will help with your energy needs. It's a good insulation, and it kind of circulates your heating and cooling, so it's warmer during the day or cooler whenever you want, because they have vents up here. So if it gets too hot for you, then it uses a suction. Now this solar gain is when you use the heat or solar radiation and you pull it into your home to keep your home warm. Thermal mass is like bricks. Those, when they get warm from the sun, they retain the heat for a little while. So let's talk about the real stuff, cooling, which we need here in Texas. So again, this is if you have not built yet. And now, if you do have a home already, it's not too late, but it's just a little bit more expensive, to be honest. So with convection and ventilation, you're creating a pressure suction system, basically. They use geothermal heating, cooling with the pipes underneath. So it takes the coolness from the ground and brings it into your home. And through this ventilation up here, then you move the hot air out, right? Heat rises, right? So you want to get that out, and you want to bring in more cool air into your home. And that's about it for the heating and cooling. Now, one thing that we need to consider for living off grid is hygiene, right? A lot of people back in the day didn't make it because they got a cut and it got infected, and they couldn't survive that. It sounds so silly, but people died from simple things like that. So how do we stay healthy and clean? First thing we need is water, clean water, right? We don't want to get sick and have digestive issues, and then that spreads to your family, right? So a few ways for water. If you have chlorine tablets, that's essential. But what if shit hits the fan, right? I mean, sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Okay, so we can boil our water. Now these sand columns are the way they used to do it way back in the day. Of course, this is more high tech, but it's a filtration system. They have the water, the sand trickles down into the gravel. Now some people do this opposite, like they use the bigger pieces first and trickles down into the system. You do what I would say, research for yourself and do what's in your heart you think is best and safest. But although they did it this way. And then there's also tree tapping. You can get this guy, says buffalobees.com, but there's other ways for tree tapping. There's a few trees, there's like 5 trees, I think sycamore and birch, and I forgot the other few that you can get. It's going to be kind of sugary water, to be honest. Now you can boil that sugar water and get yourself some syrup. So that's a dual purpose. But you can get enough water out of these trees to survive. That's the big thing. I think don't we have birch here? I know maple, but we don't think we have maple here. That's right. Yeah, so maple also. And then, of course, there's distillation that we can do. Now, if you don't want to buy yourself a distillation kit, that's totally fine. You can do it yourself with the heat of Texas, right? You get some water and set up, like how we saw in this guy here, kind of like that. You put a bunch of water underneath, and you'll put like a rock here. Say you dig a hole or a basin or something, like, depending on how much water you want to hold. You put the water in there, it with the heat will rise in here until in the hole or basin you will put a bowl or some type of collection device maybe this guy, and he will rise and the good water will funnel into like that. Yeah, so that is a very tricky. I think with distillation would be the safest because even boiling the water still the chemicals are in there, right? So I think they said that distillation was the safest way to do it because while you're distilling, you're boiling out the chemicals and only getting the good water. When I think about in the lab when we used to do things, when we would have to separate, right? We used distillate. This is way back in the day before we had machines to do this kind of stuff. We would distilled to separate, and we would collect the pure, whatever we needed. So I think distillation would be the safest. Now I don't work for the EPA, okay? So I don't. I just want to put that out there. In my opinion, I think distillation would be the safest. All right, toilets. This is a big thing. If you're not going to do, your waste in the biofuel system, where else can you do your business, right? You can go outside and dig a hole and things like that. You can set yourself up an outhouse. That is also a thing. Composting toilet is pretty cool. Now these guys here, those range from $400 to like $1,200. This separates right here. You can't really see it, but there's. Oh, can you tell this is live?